What is going on, everybody? Back again today talking about, as you can tell by the title, Valiant Comics. I knew about Bloodshot because of the Bloodshot movie. And I remember when that movie came out, I did like a minimal amount of research about Bloodshot because it's a comic book character that I knew nothing about. I wanted to know more. And in my little bit of research that I did, I only got to the point where he's from Valiant Comics. What is Valiant Comics? Valiant Comics is this very obscure comic book publishing company that was founded in the 90s by a Marvel guy that left Marvel, but it never really went anywhere and kind of just fell to nothing. And that's where I just was like, oh, okay. So I stopped. I watched the Bloodshot movie, and that's what made me, look into this. But that's as far as it went. Now, go back about, let's see, sometime in January of this year, I put up a video about DC Comics and comics in general and shit. And somebody commented, and we ended up getting into a discussion, and they were just like, you gotta stop expecting the two big ones, the two titans of the industry, DC and Marvel. You have to stop expecting them to actually give a shit about their comics because they've moved on to bigger and better things. All right, they've got live action movies, live action TV shows, animated movies, animated TV shows, video games, toys, merchandise. Like, they've moved on to bigger and better things. The comics represent a very small amount of the income that they bring in because of this property. So the comics are just kind of like an afterthought for them at this point. The priority is live action, then probably animation, and then video games and stuff. Yeah, toys, merchandise. But the priority for Marvel and DC is no longer comics because they don't bring in the big bucks. So this guy talking to me, he's like, if you want good comics, you have to go to a comic book series, maybe even a full, like, just go to look for a comic book company that has not yet branched out into, bigger things like live action films and whatnot. And he said there's a lot of Image Comics series that fall under that because Image, even though some Image stories and comic book series have like made it big and gone on to be like live action movies and TV, The Walking Dead is the most notable of them. The way Image does their stuff, Image is like you often hear the term the Marvel universe or the DC universe or multiverse. Image Comics is a multiverse in that all of the different comic book series that they publish, they are all published under Image, but they are their own creator-owned thing. And they will not cross over with any other Image published comic book series unless it is agreed upon by all parties involved. So it has the potential to cross over and connect and be a bigger thing, but it isn't just inherently that way. With Marvel and DC, if you're going to create a new character for Marvel, it is automatically going to be part of the greater Marvel universe. That's just going to happen. So he recommended Image, and I it's not like I didn't know about Image. I read Spawn, I read Invincible. Invincible is getting it has the first season of its animated TV show adaptation on Amazon Prime, which is fantastic, by the way, and that's the show that made me want to read the Invincible comic. I'm fine with it, them taking Invincible and making it into this, bigger thing. It's now television. It's not just comics because the comic book series is done. The entire comic book run of Invincible and all of its spin-off series is done. It's all done. It's one big thing that you can read. It has a beginning, a middle, and end. It's done. So now they can just adapt it into TV shows, movies, whatnot. When it comes to having a long-running comic book universe, though, that just, doesn't seem to have an end, they just want it to go on forever. The moment that a company takes that and starts translating it into bigger things, live action movies and TV shows, and it becomes successful in those realms, the comics then become less important because live action feature films released in theaters are always going to bring in more money than comic books ever could. So the number one comic book company that this guy suggested to me is like, if you want a comic book company that is fantastic and it has all the potential to be like a Marvel Cinematic Universe type thing, it just has not gone there yet. What you want is Valiant Comics. And I was like, what is Valiant Comics? Did a little bit of research, saw, oh yeah, it's that thing that Bloodshot was part of. Well, I don't want to read some obscure 90s comics. Nope. Turns out Valiant Comics in 2012, kind of riding on the coattails of DC. DC did their big like New 52, we're rebooting the whole fucking universe in 2011. Valiant Comics did it in 2012. They took their entire comic book universe, just everything that came before it, scrapped, in the trash, gone, goodbye, it doesn't fucking matter. And they started everything over from square one. And it's really good. Like, really good. We're going to go over some of the different like key series in this, but before we do that, I want to just describe Valiant Comics overall. If you like the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Valiant Comics, the 2012 rebooted universe of Valiant Comics, that is the closest thing you're going to find to the MCU in comic book form. It has a very large roster of characters. I think Valiant Comics boasts that it has the third largest collected comic book universe, like in terms of characters, settings, locations, cultures. It has the third largest. Marvel and DC are both bigger, but they're not kidding. It is big. There are plenty of characters, plenty of settings, and like any good collected fictional universe, it looks like every individual piece of it was built on its own to stand on its own. And then only once that was done did they start to think, how can we how can we bring this together and tie it together a bit better? So yeah, it is very well connected, it's very cohesive. There are guides you can find online to the proper order to read Valiant Comics. And then another thing I really like about Valiant Comics is the way they structured the reading order. They didn't structure it issue by issue. They structured it story arc by story arc. And then the way they ended up publishing collected editions, like the trade paperbacks, you can buy and read these in the proper order. You're not going to run into a scenario with Valiant Comics where it's like, okay, well, I need to read, like, these two things take place at the exact same time, but this one takes place before. No, there's a completely 100% proper order to Valiant Comics from their reboot forward, and it's pretty easy to follow. It's like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, you start with Exo Man of War, then Harbinger, then Bloodshot, then another Exo Man of War, Archer and Armstrong, Shadow Man, and there's, like I said, there's guides you can find, and they do also, just like Marvel and DC, they do big event stories, big event story arcs, and from, like, I didn't even know this. I can't believe I slept on this. From 2012, when they started this, all the way up until like 2018, at least in the comic book world, Valiant Comics was killing the game. Like, they were winning all the awards, all kinds of the awards. They won event of the year at least 3 times in a row, I think. Like, a lot of their like major crossover events are very highly praised. Harbinger Wars, Armor Hunters, Book of Death. Eventually, the characters do unite to form kind of like a superhero team, Avengers-style superhero team. I'm not that far along in the overall Valiant story yet, but I know it happens. So yeah, I highly recommend this series. I am going to go ahead and warn you all, though, that right now Valiant Comics is suffering, and it's suffering because in 2018 they got bought by a new company, DMG, I can't remember what it is. It's the same, like, big, it's like what we talked about before. Like, once a big studio company gets involved and they want to do bigger things with the property, like live action movies and shit out of it, then the comics take a back seat and start to suffer, and that's what's happened. The reason there was a Bloodshot movie was because this new company bought Valiant, and their whole primary goal is, hey, fuck the comics, we don't care, we want to make big budget live action movies and rake in the billions of dollars from that. And yeah, it shows. Like, since 2018, Valiant Comics has had a pretty consistent decline in its quality, which is a shame, because from 2012 to 2018, we got 6 years worth of just outstanding content from Valiant Comics. So just be prepared for that. If you do decide to get into it, it does go downhill eventually, but everything does sooner or later. So yeah, let's take a look at some of the characters. So to give you guys in the comic book and the stories. So, whoops, didn't have this ready to go. All right, so first up, X-O Manowar. So who is X-O Manowar? They say he's Valiant's flagship character. I think these days a stronger argument could be made for Bloodshot, but fuck it, who cares? X-O Manowar is a Visigoth from the times of the ancient Roman Empire. He and his people, the Visigoths, were enemies of the Roman Empire, and they were constantly fighting against it. One day, him and dozens of other Visigoths from his people, they get captured by aliens visiting the planet Earth. Him and his fellow Visigoths get taken aboard a spaceship, the alien spaceship, and they go into outer space, and they are prisoners and slaves on this ship for 7 years in outer space. Eventually, though, they orchestrate an escape or breakout, and he obtains this almost like religiously worshipped suit of armor, this blue and yellow, blue and golden suit of armor. It is not designed by the aliens that took him prisoner. They, to be honest, have their own almost like mythological beliefs, religious beliefs surrounding this suit of armor as to its origins and where it came from. They don't entirely know. They have stories about where it came from, but they don't entirely know. But this is basically like the greatest armor weapon of mankind of ever, like in the history of mankind, in the history of history. It's the best armor. Like, it's Iron Man's armor on crack. It's the shit. And every single one of the members of this alien race that have tried to put the armor on and tested themselves, like, am I worthy enough to wear the armor? The armor has deemed them unworthy and has killed them. Well, you guessed it. Auric, his name is Auric, A-R-I-C, Auric of Dacia, the Visigoth, X-O Manowar. Auric puts the armor on, and it accepts him. It chooses him as the champion, and gives him all the powers of the armor, and teaches. It's kind of like, imagine like Matrix style, like it just like, he just knows how to use it. The armor just like connects to his brain, his central nervous system, and he just knows how to use it. It can fly. It's damn near indestructible. It pretty much is indestructible. He can fly wearing the armor. It's indestructible. He has invulnerability, super strength, flight. I said flight already. Typical, like I said, Iron Man on crack. And to be honest, he never really has to take the armor off, ever. He does, but it's not a requirement. It can shoot the generic, like laser blast beams from the hands and stuff, but he can also just, like you see here very often, he just creates since he's a Visigoth warrior from like the times of ancient Rome, he often just summons a sword made of lightning. Just a sword. Talk about a lightsaber, right? Anyway, he summons a sword made of light and just starts hacking foes to pieces, just left and right. So he is a warrior by nature, and he's a warrior from very primitive times, but once he gets a hold of this suit, he is the sole survivor of his Visigoth group of people that were taken prisoner that manages to escape the alien ship. And with the suit, he flies back to Earth, and due to time displacement and, science, physics, all that shit, it's been 7 years in space for him, but it has been 1,600 years on planet Earth, and it is now modern day Earth. The Visigoths are gone. The ancient Roman Empire is gone, and he is confused. So this is just like Talk about a very unique, wacky, awesome idea. This is a great story. He is a man out of time like Captain America, but he's got this high-tech suit of armor like Iron Man, but it's not, he didn't make it, so it's like alien armor, kind of like Blue Beetle, and it's very interesting. This is both this Exo Man of War is Valiant Comics. He is their Iron Man, and he's also kind of like their Silver Surfer. He's their space hero. Like, he often, since he no longer feels like he has much of a place on Earth, he does end up having, he's a man out of time. His people are long gone. He does spend a lot of time in space, fighting like alien invaders, evil alien empires and shit. And yeah, so great character. I love Exo Man of War. Can't recommend him enough. The next series that you're going to get into with Valiant is called Harbinger. This is basically Valiant's version of X-Men. In this, in the Valiant universe, there are people who are born with superpowers, but all of their superpowers are they're psychic based, and instead of calling them mutants, they're called psiots. The series mainly revolves around this guy right here, Peter Stanchek. He is an Omega level psiot, and there hasn't been an Omega level psiot since this guy, Toyo Harada. And so they are, as you can guess, rivals. It's weird because even though all of their powers are meant to be like psychic in nature, they don't manifest themselves in psychic ways. Like, this guy uses his psiot power is basically that he can psychically project himself into being this giant dude with giant muscles, and he's super strong and has like unbreakable skin. So basically he's Colossus, but it's supposed to be psychic. It's not like he actually makes himself big and strong. It's psychic, but he does make it's weird. If you start trying to think about it too hard, you're going to call bullshit on it. But it's basically Valiant wanted to do the X-Men, and this is the best way they could come up with to do the X-Men while still making it different in terms of like the powers and how the powers work. In terms of the story, it is a nice twist because Harbinger is the name of the Harbinger. It's the Harbinger Foundation. There is no character called Harbinger. It's the Harbinger Foundation, and Harbinger Foundation is run by this guy Toyo Harada, and he's basically Professor X. But that's the twist. Whereas in X-Men, Professor X is this totally good guy who's like, we must bring peace between mutants and human beings. Toyo Harada is basically like, no, psiots are better than humans, and humanity has caused enough damage to itself and the planet, so he is using he's very old actually, he's using his billions of dollars to create the Harbinger Foundation. He's slowly, subtly, and secretly trying to conquer the world. But he's the Professor X. He's running the Harbinger Foundation, which has the school where they recruit the kids to teach them how to use their powers, but it's not about teaching them to use their powers responsibly so they can live a life amongst humans and get along peacefully. No, I'm creating my own private army because I'm going to take over the world. And this kid gets involved because he knows that he is like one of the few people in existence that can rival him in power level. So he tries to recruit him onto his side, doesn't go as planned. But I'm not going to reveal any more about the story. You'll have to read it. If this sounds interesting to you, it is a good read. I'm not saying it's not a good read. I'm just saying that like the explanation of the powers, there's psiots because all their powers are psychic. Not really. Some of their powers are just like, this bitch can summon fire. Like, they're not all psychic. They're all like, some of them just straight up have superpowers. All right, so they're not all psychics, but whatever. It is supposed to be. It's psychic in nature. It's mental in nature, and they're called psiots. So yeah. All right, Bloodshot. We've talked about him a little bit already. Bloodshot is a cross between Wolverine and Punisher, but primarily Wolverine. He's only Punisher in that, he's a little more clean cut, and he often carries like a ton of weapons, guns, knives, swords, and that's more Punisher than Wolverine. Wolverine's got his claws and his healing factor. And speaking of healing factor, that is kind of what makes this guy similar to Wolverine. He has in his bloodstream nanites, nano microscopic robots, like a fuck ton of them. And if he ever gets injured, they will go to that part of his body, and the nanites and the micro robots, they'll immediately start repairing his body. And if he needs to like punch through a brick wall, the robots will like form up in his fist and kind of like reinforce his fist so that he can actually punch through a brick wall without breaking his hand. So because of this, he can't really die. The nanites, they do need fuel, which is basically he needs to eat protein. He has to eat meat, and the robots turn the protein into fuel, and that's what makes the robots work. But as long as he's got enough of the robots in his body, which he always does, at least so far in what I've read, he will. And as long as he manages to get fuel, enough protein for them, he will repair, he will survive, he will live. So he is similar to Wolverine in that regard. He's also similar to Wolverine in that he was created by this organization called Rising Spirit. And he has no memory of who he was originally. Rising Spirit, he was a soldier, he was a military man at one point, and I guess he died, and Rising Spirit used his body as to experiment with these nanobots. They put the nanobots in him, it worked, and since then they've just been kind of like, he can be turned off. He is essentially like a robot, an electronic weapon. So they turn him off, they bring him back online when they need him. Rising Spirit does. And they feed him fake memories about his past life to help motivate him go along with the missions that they want him to, go along with. Well, the whole plot of his story is he realizes that Rising Spirit's lying to him, it's bullshit, and he has no memory of who he really was. All the memories that they've ever fed him, like, as far as he knows, they're all a lie. He has no idea if any of them are real. So he's kind of like Wolverine in that way. He has no past. He doesn't remember who he was. And then, of course, like I said, he's Punisher because of like all the weapons and the weapon knowledge and expertise. So great character. I'm really liking Bloodshot. He plays a very big role in Valiant Comics' first big crossover event, Harbinger Wars. So Bloodshot is a staple of this universe. You're never going to have the Valiant universe without Bloodshot. Archer and Armstrong. Archer and Armstrong is kind of like Indiana Jones with a buddy cop theme. So this is Archer, this kid. He's depicted a little differently in these two pictures, but this is Archer. He was raised by this like religious zealot organization to be like an assassin for them and their beliefs. And this guy, Armstrong, is a member of this trio of brothers. There are 3 of them that are all immortal. For one reason or another, they are immortal. This one particular, Armstrong, he's kind of at the point now in his life, his very long life, where he just wants to drink and gamble and flirt with women. But they end up through, chance of events, they end up meeting each other. He was actually sent to kill him. They end up meeting each other. They end up partnering up, buddying up. He realizes that the religious fanatical organization that raised him and indoctrinated him, manipulated him, that they're actually pieces of shit. So they end up kind of teaming up. It's like a buddy cop Indiana Jones film. It's got a lot of humor, not a film, but buddy cop Indiana Jones comic. It's got a lot of humor, funny jokes. The dynamic between these two is pretty great. It has not yet, built upon anything in the Valiant universe that I've read. So far, it's just been it's just these two having their adventures together. But I know it will, it'll amount to something bigger eventually. I just got to get there. But still good, still worth the read. I recommend it. And then Shadow Man. Shadow Man is basically Valiant Comics' answer to Ghost Rider. He is the supernatural hero. He's a normal guy most of his day-to-day life, but he has this like spirit, this like ghostly, not a demon, but it's like a ghostly spirit, grim reapery type spirit that is bound to him. And it's bound to him because it was bound to his father. He's the next in the bloodline. He can turn into Shadow Man. Shadow Man is the supernatural hero. He fights ghosts, demons, specters, whatever the case may be. He's there to keep the forces of the nether and the supernatural at bay. And yeah, he's badass. And I like his look. I love when a comic book company can give a character a very simple look, but even though it's simple, it just stands out. And I don't think anything works as well as black and white. Like if you can do a black and white character a black and white color scheme character and like do it well, I think that looks awesome. I love Shadow Man's look. So yeah, if you're into like if you like characters like Ghost Rider, Spawn, characters that deal with the supernatural and like, you know, keep the forces of the supernatural at bay and keep the human world safe from that, then Shadow Man's probably going to be right up your alley. Once again, this is another character that he has not yet really crossed over and done anything greater in the Valiant universe up until the point where I've read. But once again, I'm not all that far along, and I know he will. I know he'll go on to do bigger things. So yeah, so that's the end of that show. There is or that slideshow. There is actually one other character that I forgot to put in the show. I'm actually really pissed off at myself about it. But let's see here, Ninjak. So Ninjak is a ninja, obviously, but he is imagine like Batman, but he just decided to not have a bat motif, and he also decided to make money off of his skill set. So that's basically Ninjak. He is a ninja mercenary, highly trained warrior, but he's also a billionaire playboy in his life. He's kind of a spy. It's like imagine James Bond, but as a ninja. You know, it's interesting. I like Ninjak. I like him as a character. You first see him in Exo Manowar. He goes up against Exo Manowar. He's hired to kill him and get the armor from him, and doesn't really go as planned. Even though he is kind of a mercenary slash ninja spy for hire, he's not a bad guy. He is more often than not a good guy, and he has been known to, like, if he finds out that like, he won't take certain jobs. If the jobs are very kind of malicious and evil in nature, he won't take those jobs. And if he ever finds out that his employers have lied to him and are using him to do really evil, harmful, malicious things, then he usually turns on them. So, not a bad guy, great character. Really like Ninjak. So far, as far as I've read to this point in the comics, Ninjak does not have his own series. Clearly, he gets one though. But yeah, he starts off as an extra character in Exo Manowar, but I do know for a fact that Ninjak becomes another big staple of the Valiant Comics universe. So yeah, there he is right there. This is a look at a lot of the different characters. So yeah, that's Valiant Comics. I love it. I'm really enjoying it. I can't recommend it enough. I am currently on Harbinger Wars. These are all the trade paperbacks that I own up to this point. I do not own everything that I've read. I'm working on it. I have a lot of them on the way in the mail, and I'm currently reading Harbinger Wars. Once I'm done reading that, I will buy the paperback compendium of that as well. But yeah, outstanding. The guy who recommended that I branch away from Marvel and DC, who pointed out to me, like, hey, once it ventures into live action movies and TV shows and video games and stuff, they don't care about the comics anymore. His channel is called Hold the Truth Hostage. I like his opinion on comics. I know that's really all I can say. Maybe check him out. I don't really know what all the rest of his channel is about, but as far as his opinion on comic books go and his videos that he puts out about comics, I think he's spot on when it comes to comics. But yeah, Valiant Comics. If you're looking for something different, if you're tired of the same old, or if you're just like, man, like, I want to read comics, but looking at Marvel and DC, there's so much, and you don't know the proper order, you don't know the proper starting point. You don't know the proper starting point. You don't know where to begin. You don't know where it ends. Like, Valiant Comics. It's very easy. There are plenty of people who've put reading order guides online. Just look those up and get reading, because it's really good. Can't recommend it enough. So that's my little take on Valiant Comics these days. Let me know what you guys think. Anybody else dislike Valiant Comics? Do you think it's ever going to recover from the state that it's currently in? Let me know in the comments below. Leave some comments, get a discussion started. If you like this video, please hit that like button. That really helps out my channel. If you want to help out my channel even further, check out some of my other videos and maybe subscribe. But other than that, I'll see you guys next time.